Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I rise in strong support of this bipartisan amendment. This amendment is a simple one. It prohibits the use of taxpayer funds in furtherance of the implementation of the European Union's emissions trading scheme. Starting in January, the European Union began to unilaterally apply the emissions trading scheme, ETS, to civil aviation operators landing or departing from one of the EU member states. Under the emissions trading scheme, EU member states will require international carriers and operators to pay emission allowances and, in some cases, penalties for carbon emissions resulting on their operations. The EU's emissions trading scheme will apply to the entire length of the flight, including those flights outside the European airspace. For instance, for a flight leaving Los Angeles for London, taxes would be levied not only for the portion of the flight over the United Kingdom, but also for portions of the flight over the United States in international waters. Despite serious legal issues and objections by the majority of the international community, including the United States, India, Russia, China, and the International Civil Aviation Organization, the EU is pressing ahead with its plans. Russia, China, and India are taking very clear actions in opposition to the EU's emission scheme. China and India have directed their air carriers not to comply with the EU's ETS requirements. China has delayed Airbus orders. India is threatening in-kind retaliation, and Russia is threatening to deny airspace access to European air carriers. The European Union's unilateral application of the emissions trading onto the U.S. operators without the consent of the United States government raises significant legal concerns under international law, including violations of the Chicago Convention and the U.S.-EU Air Transport Agreement. The emissions trading scheme will actually harm efforts to reduce global aviation emissions. By taking money away from airline industry that would otherwise be invested in next-gen technologies and purchase of new aircraft, two proven methods for improving environmental performance, the EU is siphoning scarce money to be used as each member state see fit. A better approach to address the aviation impact on global emissions is to work with the international civil aviation community through the UN International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, to establish consensus-driven initiatives to reduce emissions. However, because the EU has made no effort to delay or retract the illegal emissions trading scheme, this amendment is necessary to ensure the American taxpayer dollars will not be used to further the Europeans' unilateral and questionable scheme. Last October, the House passed H.R. 2954, which directs the Secretary of Transportation to prohibit U.S. carriers from participating in the Europeans' illegal scheme. A companion bill has been introduced in the Senate. It is my hope that the Senate will move quickly towards its passage. That legislation, along with this amendment to the Transportation Appropriations for fiscal year 2013, will send a very strong message to our European friends that illegal and unilateral action to address the aviation emissions is not the proper course of action to deal with this issue. This must be a consensus-driven solution, not an international mandate. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back.